Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us this week for Demystifying Money. I'm your host, Misty Lynch, and I'm joined by Melissa Byron. She is an all-female tour creator, solo travel expert, and the owner of A Solo Woman Traveling. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
This episode of Demystifying Money with Misty Lynch is proudly sponsored by Soundview Financial Advisors. Visit www.soundviewfinancialadvisors.com to learn more.
So I talk to a lot of people, and sometimes when I ask what their financial goals are, I hear travel more often than not from my single clients, from my all of the above, all ages. I talk about traveling, but then sometimes I'll see that the budget for travel is really not getting touched. So I think that people, I think there's a lot of things that might go into why people want to travel, but maybe aren't doing it. And I'd love to talk with you today a little bit about how you got into the travel industry and some tips that you might have for people who maybe have that dream of traveling, or they're looking at trips online, or they're seeing people travel, but maybe are a little hesitant to do so themselves. So how did you get your start in this industry?
I got my start kind of late, actually. It was 2009. I was just about to turn 30, and I had the big dreams of going to places like Rome and Greece, but I didn't have anyone to go with. So for a long time, that was what was stopping me, was thinking, well, I have to go with a partner. I could never afford to go by myself. And then as I got older, I decided, before 30, I was like, I'm going to just make this happen. I'm going to do some research and I'm going to take that trip. So that's when I got started. I went to Rome and I went to Greece. I did Santorini, Athens, and Mykonos for my first solo trip ever.
So what did you think your career would be? So you started this when you were in your 20s. So what were you doing before up to this point? And I'm just curious because a lot of the entrepreneurs I talked to had different plans for where their things would unfold. So I love to kind of hear, like, what did you think you would be when you were maybe back in 2000?
Yeah. I mean, I was doing all the jobs from administrative assistant, and then I got myself into working in commercial insurance for a long time. And then I started doing property management, which kept me going actually into my mid 30s before I turned this love of travel that started from solo travel into a career that I have now.
That's awesome. And so I think that traveling is, it's interesting. Before COVID, people would look at what they spend traveling or on food and beverage, all of those things, and they would have shame and judgment all the time. They'd be like, oh my gosh, don't look at that, or I'm so embarrassed by that. And then COVID hit, and then people all of a sudden couldn't travel. They couldn't go out to eat. They couldn't. And so it's interesting now how people are kind of reassessing what they want to do or what they enjoy doing or what they missed and want to make sure they bring back. So tell me a little bit about travel from your perspective. What do you think that has added to you as as a person, out in the world? What has traveling done for you, and why do you think it's so important for people to experience?
Well, for me, traveling has changed my whole life. I became a more confident and secure woman the more trips I took on my own. I saw that even in the career I had before travel, where, if I'm out there in a foreign country, learning how to take the transit by myself, spending the day alone, eating alone, just over time, you become more secure and more confident. So it really helped me grow and broaden my horizons. And the people I met along the way really made the journey so much more special. And yeah.
Yeah, I think that's something that people, getting back out, meeting, being with around new people. I think that is something that people are missing, especially even now, people who are working fully remotely still, or maybe they're not in that environment where they're around people all the time. So I do think that human connection is so important. And that's why people, I think, are kind of looking at bringing back travel or going out to dinner, all of these things where they're actually with people, has been something that I've seen, people feel a little bit less bad about, a little bit more like, this is important to me, which is fantastic. But I was somebody who traveled for work for quite a while. And you're right about solo travel. It does make you feel a little bit more confident because you don't really have anybody to lean on or rely on, or you can't really space out when you're traveling by yourself. And I will say eating in a restaurant by myself became very comfortable for me. And I was able to go to all these different places that I wanted to because I was really the only person that had to decide. So I think solo travel, sometimes I think that's what people are afraid of. What if I'm sitting by
Yeah.
myself? What is that gonna, look like? But I think it is kind of I think it's a wonderful thing. I've gotten kind of used to it at some point. So with you, I do want to mention one of the bigger hurdles that I've had people talk to me about, especially when it comes to solo travel, is something I don't know if you're familiar with, called the singles tax. So basically, what this is people are saying, like, yes, it's not like your expenses are cut in half when it's a couple versus someone traveling alone. And there was an MIT study I saw that says that that's not the case at all, and that singles are paying quite a bit or very close to what couples can be paying in certain situations. So, what are some of the things that you think can help, solo travelers plan for the expense of that? And are there any ways that they could potentially save when it comes to being a single traveler if the room is just as expensive for you as it would be a couple?
Well, I definitely utilize all like the credit card programs with the points. I even
Mhm.
talk about that on my website on really, racking up the airline miles or the points that you can use for your hotel stays to cut the bill in half. You can also travel off season where you're going to find a lot better deals and using like sites like hotels.com and booking.com where they're always offering sort of discounts and whatnot. Those are some of the quick ways to cut on accommodations.
Yeah, I think, and it's when you say, like, say we're going to a place that you're unfamiliar with. If you go off season, what are some of the things that people should think about? If they are looking to maybe get a good deal, but
Mhm.
they don't really understand where they're going. So, what are some considerations when it comes to climate or other things that can be pretty important when it comes to enjoying your trip?
Well, definitely you want to look at the climate and see like, am I going to enjoy, Paris if it's cold? Paris is a place where you could enjoy, if you're warm enough with the right clothing, but are you going to enjoy the Greek islands in the winter? The answer is probably not. So
Hmm.
you'd probably want to skip that and just kind of do the research on the destination.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's, it's interesting. That was something that, I traveled domestically and I
Mhm.
still would experience sometimes I would get great flight deals and then I'd go to Puerto Rico during hurricane season. And sometimes I would luck out, and other times there'd be cancellations and inconveniences. Is there anything that you're seeing now with travel, with airlines, with passengers, all of these things that you see in the news where travel is getting maybe a little bit more I don't want to say scary, but maybe a little bit less luxury experience as it might have been when people used to travel in the past? And how do you avoid frustrations when it comes to traveling?
Well, I think a lot of people have been coming to me specifically asking, like, where should I go?
Mhm.
Because in the summer months, like in the peak season, like, the June, July, and August, it is really overcrowded. But there are always those hidden gem destinations. So instead of Rome, maybe you go down south into the Puglia region. The same with like Amalfi Coast. Skip that and do Puglia instead. Places like Bari and
Mhm.
Monopoly are much more, they're more affordable and there are far less people.
Okay.
So that people are looking for more of the less touristy destinations. They're going to be less crowded.
So those are, I think that's a good point as far as when working or talking to somebody like you about knowing those areas. We might not know all of the places to go except for the ones that have become extremely popular or heavily advertised. And I saw something recently that in Spain people were getting squirted with water guns, I think this week, as a
Barcelona?
yes, because of the amount of travel and
Mhm.
tourism that's impacting their economy in a negative way. So, what are your thoughts about places being maybe over traveled and looking for those unique places?
I can definitely see that. I mean, cruise ships, maybe limiting the amount of cruise ships in the single week could probably help with a bit of over tourism. I know that there's talks of Airbnb becoming an issue in some of these places, specifically Barcelona. So it is, if you want to find a destination that's a little less traveled, just put put that into the Google search and find like, near Barcelona, like what are some of the hidden gems near Barcelona, and maybe fly into that city, but then easily get yourself out and go somewhere a little less busy.
What do you think that some travelers get wrong when it comes to maybe making some expensive mistakes when it comes to travel if they are trying to put together a trip on their own?
I think, well, most people do just choose the destinations that are the most touristic, and that can become the most expensive. So when you're looking for a destination and comparing it to something like if you're going to go to Paris, like I was kind of saying with the Rome example, go a little outside the city limits for those smaller towns, and you'll have a much better experience for much less
Mhm.
than you would in like the big name places.
How would you I want to talk because I especially for single women or women traveling alone, there might be certain things that they're concerned about. And one of them might be basic safety and security. What are some tips you have for solo travelers when it comes to staying safe in an area that they're not familiar with?
Well, definitely stay in the tourist areas. Like, don't put yourself outside the city limits, um, and expect to take the transit just to save a couple dollars. Like, I do, as much as it is important as a solo travel to save money, there's definitely a balance between, getting a hotel very far outside the city center of where you're staying and trying to save your money that way. Um, and as well as like when you're arriving in your new city, consider taking a transfer instead of public transit on your first day. I always tell people if they're not familiar with the city or if they're not someone that takes transit all the time, to maybe consider booking a transfer, because you don't want to start your trip off like frustrated and stressed out when you first arrive.
That's smart. Any other safety tips that you have, especially when it comes to, I think people might be worried about getting robbed or looking like a tourist and appearing like maybe an easy target.
I mean, I wear no designer anything. I don't bring designer anything. I have the, crossbody bag. It's just nondescript. I just basically dress plain,
Mhm.
and I don't wear jewelry, and I just, you know, try to fit in that sense. And I don't stress out about it too much. I do the research on my destinations. And, if you're in a heavily populated area where there are a lot of tourists, just keep your eye out and keep your hand on your bag.
Mhm.
Keep your hand on your phone. I use one of the crossbody like iPhone cases,
Mhm.
so I can't always have it on my person and hold on to it.
Yeah, I think that would probably just make it harder, like more difficult, right? And I think
Yeah.
that that's something that people can probably do wherever they are. Even I think that sometimes it is people are concerned, or maybe in their head that is one of the reasons why they're not traveling. Oh, but what if this happens? And it could just be, keeping you back from actually doing this and experiencing, some very, unique places and having a good experience. One that I would also be worried about myself would be language barriers.
Sure.
So what do you feel how and I know I just had relatives return from Spain and they said that he spoke Spanish, but everybody spoke English as well. But what are you seeing as far as language barriers, and what are some things that are maybe starting to help ease those fears when it comes to not understanding the language that well?
Well, Google Translate's wonderful if you have the app on your phone. You can speak into it and it will speak out the language that you need it to. So that's been extremely helpful. And making sure you have, the best data plan available so that you have data at all times, especially if you're alone,
Mhm.
that can combat that issue right away. Also, just looking for main places like in the area, like a hotel. Like if you really need something and someone on the street can't help you, the closest like hotel or restaurant, someone's likely going to be able to speak English in those kinds of establishments.
Okay. That's good to know because also one of the things that I would worry about would be getting lost. And so I think that would probably be really helpful too to have the data plan like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what we did without that. I guess relied on maps and paying attention, but um what are some things that you recommend for people who maybe are concerned about getting lost. Maybe they are staying slightly outside of the, where everything is, where they might need to have some directions.
Yeah, I mean, putting the offline maps on your phone, having the online map, having everything mapped out before you leave for the day, and then saving in Google Maps just certain locations. that are points of interest that you could then easily kind of get back to.
So, do you recommend that people do things like use travel insurance or
Absolutely.
other
Yes.
types of things to protect their trip? I know that there's with COVID that kind of has people thinking about
Sure.
things a little differently. But do you think that that is worthwhile? And have you ever
Absolutely.
needed to
Like
use it?
it's better to pay
Hmm.
the low cost that usually is to have that peace of mind, because things can happen. Your bag could get lost from the airline. Just
Hmm.
so many random things could kind of happen on a trip that travel insurance is definitely worth it. It's not one of those things that is worth risking.
Okay. No, that's important because I think that if you get sick or you're right, if your bags get lost, that is one thing that could ruin a trip. If you feel like you either, can't you still have to go or you have to get out of it. What are some other things that you're seeing as far as travel trends? Maybe this summer, I know the Olympics are happening, and like, are you seeing any uptick in travel or places that you're starting to see people more interested in going to?
Well, Greece is having its moment. I mean, I think Instagram has been doing a good job on promoting
Mhm.
certain destinations, and the Greek islands is one of my favorite places to visit. And they're getting a lot of attention this year,
Mhm.
I think more so than any other year before. And maybe people that would have gone to Paris are skipping it because of the Olympics and going to Greece.
Are there places that are looking for more tourists or trying to encourage tourism?
I think places like Albania is one of those countries that are, promoting for tourism, and it's a very affordable destination. Croatia, there's parts of Croatia that aren't as busy as, say, Dubrovnik, that are welcoming the tourism happily. Romania is one of my favorite places that I've been to a couple times
Mhm.
that would love to have more tourists.
Have you had anybody ask you about certain things like medical tourism or going places for I saw something recently where someone was getting all these tests and I think she was in Turkey and it looked like it was a very affordable place to get like I don't know, like scanning. It was interesting because I hadn't thought about it, but I had heard of people, traveling for certain things like that. But I didn't know if that's something that you think could continue to increase, or are some countries saying, "Hey, you can come over here and have a nice vacation and save
Yeah,
money."
now that's not one I have a lot of
Mhm.
experience with or have heard, but from what you're saying, like that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I think that it's interesting. There are a lot of places to visit that I think are maybe outside of what people normally would think of, and you're right, like Greece, I think has become more popular. I've definitely heard about people traveling there and it looks amazing. Croatia as well, has, it's like 100% coastline. And it
It
looks
is.
very,
Yeah.
very beautiful. So that definitely seems like a wonderful, place to visit. What was it? You said Romania was your favorite, one of your favorites to go to?
Yeah,
What were
Romania
certain
is a
things about
wonderful
there that you
country.
enjoyed?
Well, the people were really friendly. The castles, I mean, there's nothing like it. Like it's a whole different place than, some of the other places I've visited. It's inexpensive. The food was fantastic. I hope to go back again this year even.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, definitely that's a place to put on your radar if you're looking, because I do think there is something about the, castles or the architecture that is so different than anything
Yeah.
that we
Oh,
could find here. So, if you're somebody who's looking for that type of experience, that could be a wonderful place to think about. Um, when you mentioned that you also do tour creation, so you put tours
yes.
together. So tell me a little bit more about what that the advantages that that has for people who are looking to travel, and what kind of is a part of that experience that you handle that somebody who might want to travel but doesn't really know where to begin would be able to get.
Well, the thing with the trips that I'm organizing is it's small groups for females only. So think 8 to 10 people max, women. And we focus on more of the slower travel experience where we're going to, have an experience less traveling around. Like some of the group trips that I've been on when I was younger were every morning you're getting up and getting on the bus at like 6 a.m. and traveling to another place. We're focusing on staying in one destination a couple more days, taking our time, doing things like food tours and wine tours. And it's about the community aspect and meeting other women from around the world who love travel. They just didn't have anyone to come with them,
Mhm.
so it's like a community you know based trip and great food,
Yeah.
doing things like, yeah.
I think that could be one of, I mean, that's definitely one of the barriers is I have no one to go with, or I don't want to
Yeah.
go alone. But I do think that that is an interesting way to experience a place is in a smaller group. And you're right. I've never been a person who's wanted to go like, that feels like summer camp to me. If you get up, you're on your tour, this is the agenda. When you might not want to do that. So, but it might be nice to have some guidance as far as where to go or some meals that are together and some that are separate. So I think that's an interesting way to do that. And what are some of the costs that are associated with traveling with a tour? Like what could people expect? And definitely a little bit more about like where that value comes in and why it definitely might be worth it if you're looking to have the best experience.
Yeah, the prices vary based on the destination and the length of the tour, of course, but we cover things like the airport pickups and transfers and all the excursions. The hotels are included. There's some welcome drinks, there's some welcome dinners included. Based on the itinerary, specifically, it will state like which ones are included,
Mhm.
but all the transfers within to the various destinations within the same country, and then the transfers back to the airport.
So people wouldn't have to really worry too much about getting where they needed to go because you would take care of
No.
that piece of it. Just the
Yes,
airfare to get there because everyone's coming from somewhere different, right?
exactly. So the things that aren't covered are most alcoholic drinks are not. You're
Mhm.
going to pay for most of your own. Most of the meals, there are a few included.
Mhm.
And then that's about it. Taxes and tipping is not included as well.
Do you encourage people to go to different places or different restaurants? Have you become very familiar with certain locations that you've done tours with?
Yes, exactly. I'll only do the tour in a
Mhm.
place if I'm very familiar. And what I'll do is I will suggest a place for dinner that I'm going, and anyone who wants to join
Mhm.
can, and they'll know ahead of time, like, well, that's the menu and that's how much it's going to cost. Or they can just do their own thing
Mhm.
and spend some time. It's a good way for the tour to be a little more affordable. So it's not some, subpar meal that's included like
Mhm.
some other tours that, people
Right.
join.
Yeah, where you're paying for that anyway, but you're also
Mhm.
possibly leaving and going to
Yeah.
get something different because it is not what you want. I think
Yes.
that's such a great I think it's such a great idea. And how tell me a little bit more as you started putting these trips together, was it something that just sort of organically turned into a career or was this something what was your kind of as far as the business end of it? For
Mhm.
people who are listening that are like, "Oh my gosh, this is exactly what I would love to do." Like, how did you kind of turn it into a business that actually, replaced your corporate income?
So at first it started as a blog, right? A travel blog where I'm writing all my travel tips for the decade plus of solo travel experience I had. And then over the past year, people started coming to me being like, I want some help. I want to go these places. Would you want to come? Like, I'm going to be in town. Do you want to hang out with me? Whatever. And so then I started to think like I should probably curate some trips and some helping people plan and meeting people, meeting these women when they're coming to cities that I'm actually already in. And so that's kind of how it started. And it's been an evolving thing. We have 2 trips in 2024 and one in 2025 that's already ready for bookings.
And where will those be going to?
So in September, we have room available on the Portugal trip. It's going to be Lisbon, Cascais, and Sintra, and that's in September from the 15th to the 22nd. And then the Greek island trip for 2024 is starting October 3rd to October 11th, but that one is completely sold out. And then there will be one in Italy for May of 2025, and it's going to be Northern Italy.
Oh, wow. I'm very jealous. There's a lot of times where I'll interview people and I'll think about what they're doing for a living versus my choices. But I think that's such a I love what you're doing. I think it's so important for people to travel. And I hear time and time again, I want to travel. I'd love to travel. And there's so many hurdles, and I feel like this business that you've created, even the blog giving the information out for people is helping people really understand like, okay, well, she did that. I could do this too. I don't maybe need to be fluent in the language or have a trust fund to be able to experience the world because that's something I think people might have that misunderstanding, especially as they're seeing people online or
Yes.
influencers say, oh, this is just, I'm so brave. And then I'll see the comments being like, you have a trust fund, your parents pay for it. Like it's so funny because I think that traveling alone is brave, but also it might be something that people can create a budget or time for if they are, if they're really committed to doing that. So I think that's so important. If somebody was looking to maybe do an experience like a trip to the Greek islands, would you say that what would you say is like the thing to splurge on and the thing to save on?
Hmm. Well, you want to splurge on your conveniences and comforts to a certain extent.
Hmm.
So, if you put yourself in a hotel that's going to be comfortable, and you can save, I think, with food,
Hmm.
and, go to the grocery store in the morning and kind of have the more, bag lunch, breakfast,
Hmm.
lunch, and then like splurge on dinner. Like there's ways to cut costs creatively.
Hmm.
You can also join like group tours, like day tours to like make friends that day. And then I've done this several times. Then you end up having dinner with them and
Yeah.
splitting things.
Yeah, no, I think that that's a good point too, especially for those of us who like to share and like to try different things that maybe you just need to be connected with a group of people that also feels that same way. And maybe that whole culture could be very different as far as a group, experience as far as, dining and entertaining. So that sounds amazing. Tell people how they can find you if they're interested in potentially joining up on one of these newer trips or just following you or reading your blog and getting more information about travel.
Yes. So the URL for the blog is A Single Woman Traveling. The company is A Solo Woman Traveling. The Instagram handle is A Solo Woman Traveling. And you can find me on Facebook as well at A Solo Woman Traveling. And the tours are listed on the A Single Woman Traveling blog. You can see it in the header menu.
And remind us again where there's still space available.
In the Portugal trip this September, we have a few spots left.
Okay. Well, if you're listening and that sounds like something you'd like to have on your calendar, head over to her website, get some more information. I think it'd be definitely worthwhile to find out about traveling this way, especially if it's been holding you back, is not knowing what you maybe feel like you need to know, and relying on an expert can be very helpful. And if you're looking to see if you have any room for travel or for maybe joining a group trip like this in your budget, please head over to mistylynch.com. I'd love to set up some time with you to talk about your financial goals and travel and see how we can make sure that we find a way to fund those. Thank you so much for listening and have a great week. Don't forget to share with friends and family, and together let's demystify the world of money. Knowledge is the key to financial empowerment.